I'm Shaun Haney, and this is RealAg on the Weekend. Let's get real and get connected with the week that was in Canadian agriculture. RealAg on the Weekend starts now. Welcome, everybody, to RealAg on the Weekend here on 980 CJME and 650 CKOM. I'm your host, Shaun Haney of RealAgriculture. It is great to be with you here today. If you get some time on the weekend outside of this show, we'd love you to check out RealAgriculture.com and all the great content we've put together throughout the week. A lot happened this week. We're going to get to some of that here in a little bit. So today on the program, we're going to hear from Jeremy Boychyn. Now, he's with the Alberta Wheat and Barley Commission. Had a chance to talk to him earlier this week, and we talked about the components of yield. And I think this is something that, even though Jeremy's from Alberta, it very much fits with you here in Saskatchewan. So you're going to want to stick around for that and how we connect all the dots when it comes to putting together that ideal yield. It's not just about the seeding rate. It's not just about how much Mother Nature cooperates. There are some things that we can evaluate throughout the growing season. We're also going to hear today a portion of a conversation that I had with Dr. Tearney Woodruff from Texas A&M University for a recent Mind Your Farm Business podcast that we produce at RealAgriculture.com. And Dr. Woodruff and I discussed the power of onboarding, orientation, and training of new employees. Historically in agriculture, we just sort of say, here's where you have your lunch, here's the keys to the tractor, now go do the work. And sometimes that sink or swim mentality can be successful, and many times we've kind of set ourselves and the new employee up for disastrous results. We're also going to hear from Dr. Meaghan Vankosky. She's with AAFC in Saskatoon. Going to talk about beneficial insects, in which this was a part of our recent episode of the Pests Predator podcast that you can find wherever you get your podcasts or at realagriculture.com. If you have any feedback on the show, we'd love to hear from you. You can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. Or, of course, you can find us across all the different social media platforms, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Or you can also call that RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. Well, picket lines are up across the country as more than 155,000 Public Service Alliance of Canada, PSAC members, began their strike action this week. The union members on strike make up approximately a third. That's right, a third of federal public service. It includes employees of Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, so that AAFC research station in Saskatoon, definitely. The Canadian Grain Commission, big concerns about that, as well as many, many others. There's 250 sites across the country where people are picketing. So this is, I think, one of the largest strikes ever in Canadian history. So Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada say the strike will disrupt delivery of federal programs and services like Agri-Invest, Agri-Stability, things like the Poultry and Egg On-Farm Investment Program, Youth Employment Skills Program, and also some programming under the new Sustainable Canadian Agricultural Partnership, SCAP, as well. Another big concern is that 65% of Canadian Grain Commission employees, including staff who look after outward inspections on grain shipments, are also on strike. So the Canadian Grain Commission says that it has limited inspection staff. Some managers and specialists who are not on strike will try to backfill and help out in some of those inspections, but grain exports are likely to be significantly impacted. We saw this week the Western wheat growers brought up a position that they've had for a while, that we need to allow full third-party inspections. This is something they pushed for during the Canadian Grain Act review, and saying, hey, we can get this done because a majority of our shipments are already being inspected on top of the Canadian Grain Commission staff are being inspected by third parties. Let's just let the third parties do it and we won't have any sort of disruption. Once again, this is another concern. The strike will also affect processing of tax returns, employment insurance, immigration, and of course, passport applications, as if that hasn't had enough troubles over the past couple of years. The union says that Canadians should expect interruptions to supply chains and trade at ports and slowdowns at the border with administrative staff on strike. Here's a larger concern. Now, this may not be a concern necessarily as much in a province like Saskatchewan, but it's definitely going to have an impact in places like BC, Ontario, and the Maritimes. That has to do with temporary foreign workers. And there are farms across the prairies that do use temporary foreign workers as well. But I think of horticulture that really is reliant on this kind of labor. There is a big concern about disruption there too. Farms that employ foreign workers are very concerned that work permits are going to be delayed. Now, what also you would think, I know some farms that don't use TFW programs, but use temporary work visas. I'm probably not using the right phrase there, for like Australians or Europeans to come to Canada to work on farms. That is definitely also going to face some disruptions. This, I'm not sure there's any good time for a strike. Like, nobody says, hey, this is a really good time for this strike to happen. I'm not sure when that is on the calendar. But this is very ill time for the industry of agriculture. It's going to be very fascinating to watch how quickly, how soon does it take for the Canadian government to potentially get a little bit more serious about back-to-work legislation. The union has claimed the government is already trying to divide its members. There was an article about that in the Globe and Mail on Friday and Thursday. Of course, the issues to be resolved here, of course, like most strikes, pay compensation is one of them. Other issues are whether or not someone can work remotely for given jobs is another example that I've read a lot about. Where is the support or lack of support? Where's the sentiment when it comes to how Canadians feel about this strike? That's going to be interesting to watch as develop. On RealAg Radio on Friday, and if you haven't checked out that podcast, please do. You can get it wherever you get your podcasts. On RealAg Radio, Meaghan Murdoch from H&K Strategies talked about how typically Canadians don't have a lot of patience when it comes to longer strikes. So the longer this goes on, the more Canadians will want to see both sides come to some sort of a resolution. Now, there has been an offer made by an ask by the union. The government has counter-offered, and that has been rejected. They are, my understanding, is still at the table negotiating and trying to find some sort of resolution. But based on the size, 155,000 federal workers, this is something that Canadians, I think, are going to be, and not just farmers and ranchers, but all Canadians are going to want to see a resolution on as quickly as possible. Think about it from, another example to show you kind of some of the impacts. Think about it from a research perspective, right? We have livestock research that won't be happening. How many plots are going to potentially not get seeded, as an example, at some of our federal research stations? It's just not. And so if they do find a deal, but that deal doesn't come till, say 2 months from now, heaven forbid, you just can't say, well, now we'll seed the plots. We've lost that whole year. And so that has an impact across the longer term. We'd like to know what you think about this strike. Who is in the right? Who is in the wrong? What are some of the impacts that you potentially think we will see? I gave you some examples. Would love to hear from you. Send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com, or call that RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the onboarding, training, and orientation of new employees on the farm. You're listening to RealAg on the Weekend here on 980 CJME and 650 CKOM.
Hi, I'm Lindsay Smith of RealAgriculture.com. Join me Monday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern for The Agronomists, Canada's only live, interactive, agronomy-based show. Each week, we answer your most pressing questions with a rotating panel of agronomists, researchers, and extension staff from across Canada. Join me Monday nights, 8 p.m. Eastern on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, or LinkedIn, or head to realagriculture.com/live at 8 p.m. Eastern.
Hey, I'm Kelvin Hepner, and I just wanted to give you a heads up about a new project that we are working on here at Real Agriculture together with the Canadian Agri-Food Policy Institute, or CAPI. We're calling it the Ag Policy Connection. Stay tuned. The first episodes of the Ag Policy Connection, brought to you by Real Agriculture and the Canadian Agri-Food Policy Institute. They'll be showing up here on Real Agriculture and in your podcast feed on your podcast player shortly.
We do a great podcast at RealAgriculture.com called the Mind Your Farm Business Podcast. The whole idea is focus on farm management, farm business sorts of issues. And I know for many of you, you're having to spend more time, and rightly so, on these areas of farm management. A lot of us grow up and want to become a farmer rancher because we love the raising of the livestock. We love the growing of crops. But there also is the business side of the equation, and we need to make sure that we're taking care of that side of our operation as well. And so that podcast is brought to you by RBC Royal Bank. We've been doing a number of seasons now, and it covered a lot of different topics from financial management to marketing to human resources and a whole bunch of other stuff as well. Recently, we posted a new episode of the Mind Your Farm Business podcast, and it was all about onboarding, orientation, and training of new employees. Now, for some of you've probably experienced or done this to somebody else, where the training program at a farm is, it's a little light. It's a little bit of a sink or swim, shall we say, when it comes to training. And is that really the right way to go? Is that really setting ourselves or the new employee up for success? Well, I wondered. And so I had a conversation with Dr. Tearney Woodruff from Texas A&M University to talk about this very subject. Here's a portion of that conversation.
Well, there's a lot of reasons it's not so popular, and it's not just in agriculture, but I do find that it's sort of like this is important in agriculture too, and that's an odd concept for me of the same things that we're seeing: turnover, employee retention issues, the need for training and onboarding across the board. I think it's starting to trickle into agriculture that we need this as well, that they're starting to really see the consequences. But the reason that it's a difficulty is it's the same difficulty I think everybody has, right? I don't have enough time to implement it, right? I don't know where to even send somebody to be trained. I don't even know the first place to start, or am I going to do all this effort? And is it even going to make an impact? And so I think a lot of times, particularly farm businesses feel in fear of doing this and taking this on because they're not sure about the payout that's going to come from it. And two, they know their farm business, but everything HR, we're asked to be a jack of all trades when we're running a farm, and all of the HR and the people development may seem a little bit daunting for them to take on. Yeah.
I think you hit on something there, this undercurrent of I'm just going to train them and then they're just going to leave. And that's sort of, because I do hear that from some of our audience once in a while.
Absolutely. And I would counter with them, one of my favorite quotes is a Zig Ziglar quote is that, I'm going to hopefully get this right, but the only thing worse than training an employee and having them leave is to not train them and have them stay. And that's something that we can see time and again. You have an untrained employee on your farm, that's going to affect your productivity. That's going to affect your risk of injury and, all the liability that comes with that. So you can't afford to not train them, even if they do leave. But what we see time and again with statistics and research is that they're more likely to stay. And I could repeat so many numbers of how much more likely they are to stay with structured orientation and a structured onboarding, and then actually investing into their training and development. They're going to stay. And not only that, you as a business are going to not have to recruit as much because word gets out that you're a place that people want to work. You want to become that employer of choice. The dividends are innumerable.
Now, we've used two phrases here. We've got onboarding and we've got training. How are they different?
Sure. So, when I think about explaining what onboarding and training are, so onboarding is really going to be the work that you might do, the preparation you might do leading up to that person's first day, that first day through at least 12 weeks, but even through a year or two. So it's really the training to help somebody to be ready to contribute to your business. And so that can include everything from, we would say in onboarding, you should also have an orientation and onboarding. So orientation is really to help them to even get ready for training, helping them understand expectations. What are my resources? What are some policies? What is our culture? Really introducing them to your business itself and the people. And then orientation leads to onboarding, which is really helping them to be prepared for their role in your organization. So really introducing them to the tasks, on-the-job training, helping to prepare them to be productive in the role. Now, when we talk about that second phrase that we talked about, the training and development, that's going to be continuous. That should be throughout an employee's career. So in the same way, we hope that those who are leading the farms in different capacities or developing themselves, maybe it's, how to be a more effective manager. Maybe they're staying up to date on farming trends and technologies that are coming out. How to best manage livestock. Maybe it's compliance issues, whatever those things are. They want to be thinking about how can they engage their employees in training that allows their business to be more productive, but also personal development for their employees that make them feel valued, make them feel invested in, make them want to give back to that organization. And so every employee needs that. And I think a key part of it is that as managers, we have to get beyond seeing that work that needs to be done and seeing our employees as a means to that, to really seeing them as a person. And in the same way, they themselves need that learning, need that investment, want a job that they enjoy going to and feel satisfaction and, worth behind it. It is the same way. And so it's really viewing a shift in how we view people. If we can view the employee first, I think that sheds a light on so many of our approaches and how we might engage in these things and recognize why those are important, because we would want them to if we were joining an organization, no matter the size of it.
Yeah, so there are examples where we are doing this. We may not just think of it this way, like the local equipment dealership puts on a sprayer clinic, or Texas A&M puts on an animal husbandry course. Like those are examples.
Absolutely. And the thing is that they're all over the place. And part of that training and development might be on the job training and development that you're allowing them to upskill and learn a new task, continue to be challenged in their role and contribute. And so it's not something that you're paying necessarily for them to do. Maybe it's even, when we talk about even personal development, maybe you're even helping an employee who's struggling with their taxes, right? Their own personal taxes. You're engaging and supporting them in that way as well. So it can be multiple levels, and it's really about what does that employee need and individualizing it for them. And that comes through relationships, which again, when you're serving the needs and understanding that your people, you're going to see that experience improve for the employee as well and for your own productivity.
That was Dr. Tearney Woodruff of Texas A&M University in a recent episode of the Mind Your Farm Business podcast. You can find it by going to mindyourfarmbusiness.com or wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever program you're using. Search Mind Your Farm Business. Important topic. At the end there, you heard her say, an important question is, what does that employee need to succeed? What assets, what skills, what knowledge are you giving them? Orientation should be more than just, here's where you have your lunch and here's where you use the restroom. There's a lot of other things that they need to know in order to do that job effectively. And really, it's on management, it's on the owner to make sure that they have that. So it's difficult. It can be time consuming, but you know what's really expensive and you know what's really time consuming? Having to constantly be hiring people, searching for new people because we couldn't properly train the ones that we actually had that did have a lot of potential. This is difficult. We got to work on this in agriculture. I know even in my own company here, we got to improve on it, and we try every day. So definitely love your feedback on what you do or don't do in this area. shaney@realagriculture.com is my email. When we come back, we're going to talk all about the components of yield when it comes to your cereal crop. You're listening to RealAg on the Weekend here on 980 CJME and 650 CKOM.
The next generation is the future of agriculture, but how do we launch from one role to leading? From succession planning and family dynamics to understanding finances and making the tough calls to discovering paths others have taken all through agriculture, the Successors Podcast covers it all. Tune in with me, your host, Kara Oosterhuis, simply by searching The Successors on your favorite podcast platform, or you can find it by visiting www.realagriculture.com.
Canola is more than just a pretty face in the prairie landscape. It's a big business, both here and around the world, that requires you to be informed and up to date on everything it takes to grow a successful crop. The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com has an expert library of video resources covering markets, agronomy, and more to help you grow a healthy and profitable canola crop. Visit canolaschool.com today. Brought to you by BASF Canada and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
Whether you're seeding, harvesting, or anything in between, the Wheat School on RealAgriculture.com has you covered. Timely agronomic information from industry experts available online anytime. Give your wheat crop a good start and a great finish with the Wheat School on RealAgriculture.com. Brought to you by C&M Seeds, Syngenta Canada, and the Alberta Wheat and Barley Commission.
And welcome back to RealAg on the Weekend. I'm your host, Shaun Haney of RealAgriculture.com, and encourage you over the weekend here to check out RealAgriculture.com, whether it's news or insights on what is actually happening and how this impacts your farm or ranch. We got agronomic content and information, machinery coverage. Definitely check us out, RealAgriculture.com. It's great to be here on 980 CJME and 650 CKOM in Saskatchewan. Now we're going to talk about, we don't necessarily always get to the cropping and the agronomic side. A lot of times we're talking about the news here on the show, but thought based on the time of the year, this was a really, really important conversation. I recently had a chance to talk to Jeremy Boychyn. He's with the Alberta Wheat and Barley Commission. And we talked about the components of yield. Now, many times we talk about, hey, what seeding rate did you use? And then we jump all the way to, well, here's what the yield was. We're missing some steps. Here's my conversation with Jeremy.
We work on all these separate tactics and trying to increase yield, and really they all come down to four components of wheat that make up yield, which is the number of heads per square foot, the number of spikes per head, the number of kernels per spike, and the test weight of that grain. And those four components is really what ends up being what the yield of that wheat is. So we really want to think about tactics that are going to maximize those and make the most out of the field that we're growing on. And we can do this on a field basis. And as we move forward and technology gets better and more advanced, we can do this on a square foot area and manage specific areas that may be more or less challenged with yield and variable rate management. But nevertheless, our goal is to increase those components as much as we can without spending more than we're getting back from. And one of the things, and again, it's going to come back to seeding rates, because what happens is we get these seeding rate recommendations, and it's coming from research based on what we've seen in small plot trials and where we get the best yield out of based on our seeding rates. And we've seen kind of a shift over the past little while from targeting specific plant stands to recommendations from research targeting specific seeding rates. And I don't know exactly why that change has happened and why we're getting seeding rate recommendations rather than plant stand recommendations, but that shouldn't take away from you as a farmer or an agronomist being able to think in plant stand establishment as a relation to yield. Because if we just stop at the number of seeds per square foot we put in the ground, we're not really following along the yield components and being able to ask the question of, are the decisions that I'm making based on seeding rate, how is that impacting my plant stand, which is going to directly impact my heads per square foot, and subsequently, potentially spikes per head and kernels per spike. But really, that yield component formula of heads per square foot and spikes per head and kernels per spike and test weight, heads per square foot plays the biggest role in yield. So we want to get the most heads and the most main head tillers or secondary tillers that we can to provide as much yield as possible. So if we keep track of the amount of seed we're putting down per square foot or per square meter, and then we go in and measure 21 to 28 days, generally after it's a good time to take your plant stand count. Okay, what is my actual emergence that I got from that seeding rate? Is it reasonable? Am I losing 40% of my seed? Am I losing 10% of my seed? And then you can start making decisions on, is my seeding management practices ideal? Am I using good seed? Am I getting good emergence? And then you can actually relate the plant stand count that you get. And if you go in later at maturity, you can count the number of heads you have per square foot. And then at the end of the year, when you have your yield for that field, you can start to ask the question of how many heads per square foot is giving me the yield that I'm attaining, right? Because we know it plays a huge role. We don't want to take away from spikes per square head or kernels per spike or test weight, but that heads per square foot is going to play a big role. And if we can tie all of those components together, the seeding rate, the plant stand, the head per square foot, and then the yield component, we can start to think about, okay, what is my actual heads per square foot I'm seeing in my highest yielding fields? And what am I doing in those fields to target that? And are there other fields that are lacking? And what can I do to try and bring other fields to that level of heads per square foot? And that's where you can kind of start the basics of yield component to start asking those other individual agronomic questions of, okay, maybe I need to target this area. Maybe I need to treat my seed. Maybe I need a new seed lot. Maybe I need to be seeding at a higher seeding rate. And then if you continue to track those components year in and year out, you can really start to fine adjust those components and target those higher yield potential crops.
Yeah, don't jump from stand establishment to yield. There's things to scout and evaluate in between those two variables, right? And I think a lot of people, I don't have the data on this, so you tell me if I'm wrong, but I think a lot of people go from, this was my seeding rate, I think the stand was okay, it seemed fine, and then to the yield. And we really hard, like you sort of described, we would really help ourselves if we did some of these other evaluations.
Yeah, it's almost like the seed hits the ground. We did the target seeding rate, which is great. It's good to see producers and agronomists target those seeding rates, but doing that follow-up, that diagnosis is of, did it actually target what I was hoping for, or what are my field conditions providing that if I'm in a more drier region, and I put 300 seeds per meter squared down and I'm getting 21 plants per square foot, but another field is getting 27 and there's a huge yield difference, you can start asking the question of, maybe this field needs a little bit different management with how I approach seeding. And maybe I can bring up the yield of that lower yielding field by looking at these components and asking those questions. But it always comes down to, you can't manage what you're not measuring. And these are relatively simple measurements that if you have a square foot, you can go out and pop it down over your crop and count the number of heads in there. And same with stand establishments at that 21 to 28 days. So it really it provides that framework for you to start to ask questions about, where am I missing out opportunity to capture yield?
And if you're listening to this and you're saying, well, what does it matter? I can't do anything about it now. So if I go out there and I count the heads per square foot, so what? I can't fix if I made a bad decision, I can't fix it. The fixing happens in the next crop year. You apply that learning on the go forward. So it's what you can change is maybe some things that you do in the next crop year to not repeat a potential error in the calculation or a misjudgment of the condition, that kind of stuff. That's what we're talking about here. It's not about fixing a mistake or an issue. You're right. You can't go back and change their seeding rate once that crop's out of the ground, unfortunately. But it's about the go forward year. So important stuff. Jeremy, I appreciate you bringing this up. Thanks a lot, man.
Yeah, it's a topic I'm passionate about, and I think if we focus, really on these yield components, it can give us a framework again to really start asking some of these questions and trying to build those yield components to maximize where we're headed with the crop.
If you are interested in more agronomic content around the wheat crop, encourage you to go to wheatschool.com. It is a great resource for you to watch videos, timely videos, based on what is happening in the growing cycle. We cover a lot of stuff that's happening out east, stuff that's happening in Western Canada, and it's just a great agronomic resource for you. Go to wheatschool.com. You can also find the videos at the Real Agriculture YouTube channel. Let's take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about beneficial insects. Yes. Those little critters are working for you for free. We're going to hear from Dr. Meaghan Vankosky when we come back. You're listening to RealAg on the Weekend here on 980 CJME and 650 CKOM.
Want to get the best out of your soybean crops? Whether you've been growing them for a generation or are just starting into soybeans, find what you need to know at soybeanschool.com. You'll see videos on growing tips, pest control, and much more from specialists across the region, all in one place. Easy for you to access from your desktop, tablet, or mobile phone. Maximize your yields by staying up to date with the Soybean School, presented by BASF, Pride Seeds, and Syngenta Canada.
Before you get back in the field this year, spend some time with the Corn School on RealAgriculture.com. Get all the information you need on hybrid selection, planting depth, crop inputs, and more from a wide range of industry experts. A massive library of video content is available on demand when you need it most. Spend your time outside of the field, inside the classroom, with the Corn School on RealAgriculture.com.
So at RealAgriculture.com, we have this great podcast we've been doing we're actually just getting to the 4th season. It's called Pests and Predators, and it is brought to you by Field Heroes, which is powered by WGRF. And we focus on beneficial insects. Now, when we talk about beneficial insects, they are really those insects in the field that are working for you for free. They're predatory to the insects that are doing damage to your crops. And so we're really creating awareness and education when it comes to those beneficial insects. So you can get the Pest and Predator podcast wherever you get your podcasts. I encourage you to check it out. Go to realagriculture.com as well as an option. In episode 1 of season 4, we were just released it this week. We talked to Dr. Meaghan Vankosky. She is at AAFC in Saskatoon, and we talk about the Prairie Pest Monitoring Network and how that is really the engine to give us real insight into what is happening in terms of population trends and issues all around insects in Western Canada.
Well, it's a very collaborative group across the prairies. We co-chair it here at Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, based in Saskatoon. Owen Olfert, who was the originator of the network, he was always based in Saskatoon, and since he's retired and I've taken over, we're still kind of centered in Saskatoon, but we're co-chaired by Jennifer Otani, who's located at Ag Canada in Beaver Lodge. And we collaborate with the provinces and with huge number of other volunteers and collaborators across the prairies to monitor insect pest densities and distribution throughout the growing season so that we have some idea of where the pests are and what their populations are so that we can better help farmers and agronomists to make decisions about management.
And what is the network? What is it monitoring for?
Great question. We're looking at the population densities and distributions for about 6 to 7 different insect pests of field crops every year. So we're looking at grasshoppers, wheat stem sawfly, wheat midge, diamondback moth, cabbage seed pod weevil, pea leaf weevil, and swede midge, as well as, I might have already said wheat stem sawfly. So it is a list. There are a few of them. And we're covering off the really kind of major pests. Bertha armyworm is the other one. So we're trying to cover off some of the most important or damaging pests of oilseeds, pulses, and cereals across the prairies.
Yeah, a lot of our listeners are like, yep, I got troubles with that one. I got troubles with that one. I think you covered pretty much the full gamut of ones that we're always talking about at RealAgriculture.com. So now, important, where does the data come from for the monitoring?
Well, our data, some of it is collected by us here at Ag Canada, largely in Saskatchewan and the BC and Alberta Peace River regions by Jennifer. But it's also collected by our provincial collaborators, Dr. John Gavlosky in Manitoba, Shelley Barkley in Alberta, and James Tansey and Carter Peru in Saskatchewan, as well as some of the data, especially for grasshoppers, is collected by the Saskatchewan Crop Insurance Corporation and shared with us so that we can create the regional map for grasshoppers. And then we have, like I said, just so many, too many to list, farmer volunteers and agronomist volunteers who host pheromone traps for Bertha armyworm and diamondback moth and for swede midge. So we're getting data from a lot of different stakeholders in agriculture across the prairies that we're putting into the network to see what that distribution and pest density is. Yeah, and so there's the pest density and the pressures and those populations, and they can ebb and flow from year to year. Of course, there's a lot of environmental considerations in this, but what else are you monitoring for? Well, we do dabble a little bit in monitoring beneficial insects, and we do that mostly through our work with the cabbage seed pod weevil survey. And so we're doing that survey when canola is just starting to flower, and flowering canola is very attractive to many different insects. So predators, pollinators, and parasitoids can all be in those canola fields at that time because the canola flowers provide food for the pollinators and the parasitoids, and then other insects are attracted, so that's food for the predators. So we collect sweep samples in canola to count the cabbage seed pod weevils, but we also count all of the beneficial insects that we're finding in those fields as well to kind of give us an idea from year to year what kind of field hero activity we have across the prairies. I like it. The field heroes. Nice stuff. Okay. Yes. Now, so we've got the data set. We've got the information. How can farmers use this data? How do they get their hands on it? Right. So all of the maps or all of the data is, well, first it tends to be mapped for the provinces. So you can find the provincial insect pest maps on the provincial websites from Manitoba Agriculture, the Saskatchewan Ministry of Agriculture, and Alberta Agriculture and Irrigation. I think those are all the right names. They change on such a regular basis these days. But so the provincial maps would be available on those websites. And once all of the provincial maps have been posted, then we post the regional maps so that we can see kind of what's happening across the entire range of the prairies from the BC Peace River region all the way through Manitoba for the pests that are present or the pests that are monitored. So there are a few things that we don't monitor for in Manitoba yet, for example, and so then we might only have a map of Alberta and Saskatchewan. But all of those maps are currently, for the 2022 monitoring season, are currently available on the Prairie Pest Monitoring Network website at prairiepest.ca. Once again, that was Dr. Meaghan Vankosky with AAFC in Saskatoon talking about the Prairie Pest Monitoring Network. Encourage you to go to wherever you get your podcast and check out the Pest and Predator podcast. As I mentioned at the beginning of the show, I'm very concerned about where we're headed here with this federal worker strike. Hopefully they can get it rectified as quickly as possible. The Canadian economy, services within the country just cannot afford for this to be a long strike. We'll see how quickly they're able to come to some sort of resolution. You can send me your feedback, shaney@realagriculture.com on that or any other topic, or call the RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. Thanks for joining us here today for RealAg on the Weekend on 980 CJME and 650 CKOM.